And the funny thing that's happened in the last, well, since '08 for sure, is that every step along the way, I think the purpose of central banks and governments getting in is to prevent liquidation. Nothing's ever liquidated. The FDIC takes it over. The ECB bails out somebody. The Icelandic government goes and takes over the Icelandic banks. UK buys big interest in their banks. The Irish fund their banks. So there's never been a liquidation. And what are values in a liquidation versus, you know, a value on a balance sheet at some quarter end? I mean, a liquidation value would be considerably smaller. In fact, there would be no market.
Yeah, but you always run the risk of throwing good money after bad. Isn't that what governments are doing?
Totally. But so, they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They just think, well, the system's going to collapse if I don't do something. And they're right. It will collapse if they don't do something. So they do something. And then, of course, now the governments are going to collapse, just as the Greek government's done, the Icelandic government, the Irish government.
And maybe Italy or Spain.
Yeah.
Or it's just
now
or
the governments
UK.
will go down because who's really funding all this thing?
Then what happens?
I have no idea. I mean, you know, it's not even interesting to think about what really happens in the real world.
Yeah.
Like if the banking system shuts down, that is not an outcome that you want to contemplate. And I don't think the government's coming and said, oh, trust us, we'll take care of the banks. I mean, that's when it's over anyway, because we no longer do trust them.
Yeah.
That's why they're going to go down. So, you know, the ATM machine's going to work. Is commercial trading going to work when there's no finance mechanism? I don't have any idea, and I don't spend too much time on that. All I know is that people, to protect themselves against that happening, have to own some physical precious metals, because it will be something that will be usable no matter what the situation is.
At some future date, will gold become overvalued in your view?
Well, people ask me a question a different way. So, well, what are the things that would make you sell it? I said, well, there's three possibilities. One is if I see a mania in the market, it's just somehow I see crazy things happening. Okay, fine. This reminds me of NASDAQ 2000, and maybe I'll get off the train. The other one would be if governments became responsible. Governments and central banks became responsible would be the second reason. Luckily, we don't see that reason at all. And the third reason that you might think it's time to get out is where they would make it the reserve currency. Then you don't need to own gold and silver because you can trade for it anytime you want. Maybe you could then consider investing in other things knowing that it was backed by gold and silver.
Would you care to assign any probabilities to those three possible events?
Well, I think the probability of a mania is very high. You can feel it coming. I mean, you can feel the interest building in gold all around the world. I mean, you see it, I see it, you see it in gold money, I see it in Sprott money, I see it in our ability to raise $300 million overnight in the Sprott Physical Gold Trust. I can see it in the latent demand for the Physical Silver Trust. You see it in what central banks are doing. You kind of see it in the misunderstanding of the market by the gold producers. I mean, there's hardly a gold producer around who really believes the price is what it is, let alone that it's going to stay there. So there's this huge skepticism in the industry about the gold price. So I think it will go parabolic. I'm going to rely on you to tell me when it's going parabolic, James, because you're the expert, okay?
Well, I don't know. Getting into a market is one thing. Getting out of a market is something different. But what I always say is that gold will become overvalued, not when you're going to sell it, but when you're going to spend it. In other words, I firmly believe that gold's going to be circulating again as currency in some form, maybe digital through gold money or other alternatives. But given the fact that gold has been money for 5,000 years,
right.
And we've been experimenting with a money substitute called fiat currency for 40 years, and given the fact that this experiment with fiat currency seems to be going horribly wrong, it seems inevitable we're going to come back to gold in one way or another.
I would think so. I mean, that's the ultimate thing that's going to happen. You need something to back the currencies, and it's got to be something physical. So gold's got to play a big part, silver's got to play a big part. Maybe other commodities do, I have no idea, but those would be the two key ones that are usable, fungible and in everyday use. And that's why another reason why I think silver could be kind of interesting. Imagine if we actually had to go to a real currency that we used in our hands.
Yeah.
That's a lot of physical currency we got to create, having created all this paper that might disappear.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a very interesting thing. I was talking to a guy who ran a mint, and he said, there are people buying copper coins. And I thought that seemed really odd to me. I said, well, maybe the guy's really far-sighted and he can see it coming back as a currency, because you need the lower denominations thing to have everyday currency exchange.
Yeah, interesting,
So, yeah.
interesting. You know, Eric, this video is going to be seen by thousands of people throughout the world. Is there any last comments that you'd sort of like to leave in terms of things that you see important?
Well, I still believe that an investment in silver is a very safe investment today. When we look at the data points, they scream at us that it's undervalued. When you look at the history of what's happened in both the silver and gold market, I happen to believe in what Gatta's believe, that there's this these hands from the outside keeping things restricted, and they're going to lose control. So people have to be in precious metals if they want to protect themselves, and there aren't many other investments. I mean, that you could consider agricultural investments, but those are the key things in my mind that will protect one.
And that's a specialized area, whereas, you know, buying gold and silver are quite simple as opposed to the complexities of agricultural investments.
Yeah, it's by far the easiest. Everyone who's an investor has money. They have it invested in some paper instrument. They should take part of it and own some gold and silver.
Eric Sprott, founder and chairman of Sprott Asset Management, thank you very, very much.